I didn't ask to be transmigrated into the wildly melodramatic historical web novel, The Emperor's Beloved Lotus. And I certainly didn't ask to wake up in the body of Zhao Liying, the wicked, doomed noble consort destined to be executed in chapter 150 by the cold, ruthless Emperor Li Wei. Armed with the knowledge of my impending tragic end, I make the only logical decision. I am retiring from villainy to become a full-time slacker. My plan is simple. Avoid the Emperor, ignore the sweet heroine Lin Yu, eat imperial delicacies, and take incredibly long naps in my luxurious palace. Unfortunately, my sudden lack of jealousy and complete indifference to imperial politics makes Emperor Li Wei highly suspicious, and entirely too obsessed with my new, chaotic lifestyle. They say love is unpredictable, and today's story proves it. Welcome to Romancecravestories, where every episode is full of passion, secrets and emotional twists. Let's begin. I died because of a spreadsheet. Well, technically, I died because I fell down an open manhole while severely sleep-deprived and aggressively formatting a financial report on my phone. But the spreadsheet was the true villain of my modern life. Imagine my surprise when I woke up, not in a hospital bed with a massive concussion, but in a sprawling, ridiculously opulent bed draped in crimson silk, surrounded by weeping women in ancient Hanfu. Your Highness, the noble consort has awakened. One of the girls shrieked, promptly face planting onto the polished mahogany floor in a deep kowtow. I sat up, a blinding headache splitting my skull. I looked at my hands. They were soft, uncalloused, with nails painted a fierce, intimidating red. I looked at the intricately carved wooden ceiling, completely devoid of fluorescent office lights. And then, the memories of the original owner hit me like a runaway carriage. I hadn't just transmigrated. I had transmigrated into a highly rated, incredibly dramatic web novel I read last year. The Emperor's Beloved Lotus. Worse, I wasn't the beloved lotus. I was Zhao Liying, the wicked, arrogant, impossibly wealthy noble consort who spends the entire novel terrorizing the sweet heroine, Lin Yu, before the cold and ruthless Emperor, Li Wei, finally snaps. In the novel, my family is exiled, and I am tossed into the cold palace to drink poisoned wine. Great. Fantastic. 0 stars for this transmigration system. The maid kneeling closest to my bed, Xiaomeng, according to my shiny new memories, sobbed into her silk sleeves. Nyang nyang. We thought you would not wake after you fell into the lotus pond. His Majesty has not come to see you. He is currently at the pavilion with Lady Lin. The original Zhao Liying would have flown into a jealous, plate-smashing rage. She would have ordered someone flogged. She would have immediately started plotting to slip arsenic into Lady Lin's tea. I just blinked, running my hand over the soft silk of the blankets. It felt like absolute heaven. I didn't have to clock in at 8 a.m. I didn't have to fix macro errors in Excel. I was a high-ranking noblewoman in an ancient imperial palace with a personal chef, a massive wardrobe, and 0 actual responsibilities besides looking pretty. Xiaomeng, I said, my voice raspy but surprisingly melodious. Yes, Your Highness, she trembled, clearly bracing for the inevitable violence. Tell the imperial kitchen to prepare a roast duck, scallion pancakes, and a large pot of jasmine tea. And tell the courtyard guards that if His Majesty or Lady Lin comes within 50 feet of my gates, they are to announce that I am highly contagious. Xiaomeng stared at me as if I had grown a second head. Nyang nyang. I have decided to retire, I announced, sinking back into the luxurious, cloud-like pillows. From now on, my only rival is insomnia. Go get the duck. If Emperor Li Wei wanted his sweet lotus, he could have her. I was going to live my second life taking naps, eating rich food, and staying far, far away from the plot. Chapter 1. The roast duck was, without exaggeration, the single greatest thing I had ever put in my mouth. I sat cross-legged on the edge of my sprawling rosewood bed, wearing only a loose silk inner robe, tearing into a crispy, glazed duck leg. The skin shattered perfectly against my teeth, giving way to tender, savory meat. In my previous life, my idea of a luxury meal was a lukewarm cup of instant ramen eaten over a glowing laptop keyboard at 2 a.m. This was worth falling into a lotus pond for. Nyang nyang, please, Xiaomeng whispered frantically, hovering near the carved wooden screen that separated the sleeping quarters from the outer hall. She was wringing a silk handkerchief so tightly her knuckles were white. If the Grand Momo sees you eating with your hands, she will report us to the Empress for lacking imperial decorum. Let her report. I mumbled around a mouthful of scallion pancake. What are they going to do? Ground me? Tell them I'm convalescing. I require protein for my chi. Xiaoming stared at me, her eyes wide and shiny with unshed tears. For the past 24 hours, my poor maid had been treating me as if my brain had leaked out through my ears during my near-drowning incident. And honestly, considering the original Zhao Liying was a tempest of rage, vanity, and political ambition, my sudden desire to do absolutely nothing must have been terrifying. But Your Highness, Xiaoming tried again, her voice dropping to a desperate squeak. It has been 3 days since the incident. You have not sent a single letter to the Dragon Pavilion. You haven't sent His Majesty his favorite ginseng soup. You haven't even thrown a vase at the wall. The other palaces are starting to whisper that you have lost favor. Good. Let them whisper. Whispering burns calories, which means they'll be too tired to bother me. I wiped my greasy fingers on a warm, damp cloth provided by a bewildered eunuch. Xiaoming, bring me my jewelry box. She blinked, momentarily distracted. Are you going to dress up, Nyang Nyang? Shall I call for the makeup maids? Heavens, no. I'm going to bribe the kitchen. When she brought the heavy lacquer box, I dug past the heavy gold phoenix hairpins and diamond-encrusted earrings. Items that gave me a headache just looking at them. And pulled out a solid jade bangle. It was heavy, cool to the touch, and probably worth more than my entire apartment in my past life. Take this to head chef Wang, I instructed, dropping the bangle into her hands. Tell him that the Noble Consort expects this level of crispiness on the duck every single day. Furthermore, I want first priority on all seasonal fruit, especially the lychees. If Lady Lin or the Empress asks for them, tell him to say there was a blight. Understood. Xiaoming looked down at the priceless jade, then up at me. You are using imperial tribute jewelry for snacks? I am investing in my quality of life, I corrected. Now go. And tell the eunuchs in the courtyard to find me the strongest, thickest bolt of brocade we have, and 2 sturdy ropes. I have a construction project. By mid-afternoon, my masterpiece was complete. Between 2 massive, ancient plum blossom trees in my private courtyard, my eunuchs had strung up a glorious, deep purple brocade hammock. It swung gently in the warm spring breeze. I immediately climbed into it, arranged 3 plush silk pillows behind my head, and popped a peeled grape into my mouth. This was the peak of human existence. The original Zhao Liying was an idiot. Why spend your days plotting to murder teenagers and screaming at servants when you could literally just lie in the sun and be fed fruit? I had just closed my eyes, teetering on the edge of a glorious afternoon nap, when the heavy wooden doors of my courtyard creaked open. His Majesty's head eunuch, Eunuch Gao, arrives, a guard announced loudly. I didn't open my eyes. I just sighed. Tell him I'm dead. Nyang Nyang. Xiaoming hissed, entirely scandalized. Footsteps approached the plum blossom trees, stopping abruptly. I cracked one eye open. Standing a few feet away was Eunuch Gao, an older man in dark blue robes holding a wooden tray with a sealed scroll. He was staring at me, swinging lazily in a piece of fabric tied between 2 trees, with an expression of profound existential confusion. Greetings to the Noble Consort. Eunuch Gao managed, bowing stiffly. His Majesty has noted your unusual silence over the past few days. He sends this decree to inquire about your health, and expects your written reply detailing your reflection on your recent behavior. In the novel, this was the moment Liying wrote a 10-page, blood-stained letter accusing Lin Yu of pushing her into the pond, which only made Emperor Li Wei hate her more. I looked at the scroll. I looked at Eunuch Gao. Tell His Majesty my health is excellent. My reflection is that the pond water was unpleasantly cold, and I have no further thoughts at this time, I said cheerfully, popping another grape into my mouth. Would you like a scallion pancake, Eunuch Gao? They're very good. Eunuch Gao's jaw went slack. He looked at the pancake plate, then back at me, completely at a loss for words. Without a single word, he bowed, turned on his heel, and practically fled the courtyard, taking the scroll with him. I smiled, closing my eyes again and sinking into the silk pillows. Step 1 of surviving the plot. Confuse the enemy. Chapter 2. Without a smartphone, the internet, or a decent streaming service, the ancient imperial palace was catastrophically boring. After 3 days of sleeping, eating, and staring at the beautifully painted ceiling of my bedchamber, I had hit a wall. A person can only eat so many lychees before they need intellectual stimulation. Or, in my case, a highly inappropriate gambling ring. Roll them, Xiao Bao, I commanded, slapping my hand against the low rosewood table. And if you roll another pair of ones, I am taking your dessert rations for a week. My courtyard's junior eunuch, Xiao Bao, sweated profusely. He held a pair of bone dice in his cupped hands, shaking them like his life depended on it. Around the table sat Xiao Meng and another maid, all of us hunched over a pile of copper coins, jade trinkets, and a half-eaten plate of sweet lotus cakes. I was currently dressed in a completely unglamorous, oversized white silk inner robe. My heavy, elaborate hairstyles had been abandoned. My hair was tied up in a messy, careless knot held together by a single wooden chopstick. My sleeves were rolled up past my elbows, revealing zero imperial dignity. Xiao Bao tossed the dice. They clattered across the polished wood. A 4 and a 2. Ah! I cheered, sweeping the pile of copper coins toward my side of the table. The house wins again. Pay up, Xiao Bao. I know you've been hoarding those candied plums. Nyang Nyang, have mercy, Xiao Bao wept dramatically, reaching into his robes to produce a small silk pouch of plums. Mercy is for the weak, and I am a capitalist, I declared, popping a plum into my mouth. Pass the dice to Xiao Meng. I was having the time of my life. This was infinitely better than fighting over an emperor I didn't even like. His Majesty the Emperor arrives. The sharp, piercing cry from the outer courtyard gates shattered the joyful atmosphere like a dropped porcelain vase. Total chaos erupted. Xiao Bao scrambled backward, tripping over his own robes. Xiao Meng let out a strangled shriek, desperately trying to sweep the copper coins and dice into the wide sleeves of her dress. I simply sat there, a candied plum bulging in my cheek, watching the heavy doors to my inner hall slam open. Emperor Li Wei stepped over the threshold. If this were a television drama, the wind would have dramatically blown his dark robes. An intimidating background music would have swelled. The man was undeniably gorgeous, in a terrifying, lethal sort of way. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in dark, obsidian black robes embroidered with a sprawling golden dragon. His features were sharply carved, his jawline like a weapon, and his dark eyes were as cold as a frozen lake. This was the man destined to order my execution in 148 chapters. Every servant in the room immediately dropped to the floor, pressing their foreheads against the wood, trembling violently. I swallowed my plum, wiped my sticky fingers on a napkin, and gave him a lazy, seated nod. Greetings, Your Majesty. You didn't RSVP. Li Wei stopped dead in his tracks. His cold eyes swept over the room. He took in the overturned stools. He took in the terrified servants. He took in the bone dice that had escaped Xiao Meng's sleeve, and were currently resting by his black silk boots. Finally, his gaze landed on me, the supposed wicked, jealous villain of his harem, sitting barefoot in an inner robe, hoarding a pile of candied fruit. What? Li Wei said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that sent a shiver through the room. Are you doing? Consolidating wealth. I answered honestly. Xiao Bao is terrible at calculating probability. Li Wei stared at me. He looked genuinely derailed. Eunuch Gao informed me that you returned my decree with no response. I assumed you were throwing a tantrum, or plotting to poison someone. Instead, I find you running a gambling den in your bedchamber. Plotting takes a lot of energy, Your Majesty, I sighed, leaning my elbow on the table and resting my chin in my hand. And tantrums give me migraines. I decided to pivot my strategy toward self-care. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his dark eyes narrowing. Self-care. You threw yourself into the lotus pond 3 days ago, because I chose to have tea with Lady Lin instead of visiting you. You screamed that you could not live without my favor. Ugh, original Zhao Liying, you dramatic fool. I had an epiphany in the water, I said smoothly, waving a dismissive hand. The water was very cold. It cleared my head. I realized that my behavior was undignified. If you wish to have tea with Lady Lin, you should. She is very sweet. You two look lovely together. I fully support it. Li Bei Zhao Tiktanat. He looked like a man who had braced himself to fight a tiger, only to be confronted with a highly apathetic house cat. He stepped right up to the edge of the low table, towering over me. The sheer, imposing aura of the tyrant emperor was suffocating, making Xiao Meng whimper softly into the floorboards. You support it, he repeated, the words dripping with suspicion. You, Zhao Liying, who had a maid flogged last month simply because she accidentally wore the same shade of pink as Lady Lin. A dark time in my personal history. I have grown. I lied without blinking. From now on, this courtyard will be a haven of peace, quiet, and early bedtimes. You do not need to worry about me harassing your favorite anymore. My days of jealousy are entirely behind me. I smiled, a completely genuine, relaxed smile. Li Wei didn't smile back. Instead, a strange dark intensity flared in his eyes. He leaned down, placing both of his large, calloused hands flat on my rosewood table, bringing his face dangerously close to mine. He smelled like sandalwood, cold ink, and power. "What game are you playing, Liying?" he whispered, his voice dangerously soft. "Right now? Just a simple high-low dice roll," I replied, innocently pushing the bone dice toward him. "Would you like a turn? The buy-in is 2 coppers. Li Wei stared into my eyes for a long, heavy moment, searching for the lie, the scheme, the trap. He found absolutely nothing but my desire for a nap. Slowly he straightened up, his golden dragon robes rustling in the quiet room. "I will be watching you, Noble Consort," he warned, turning his back to me. "Please don't, I sleep with my mouth open," I called out as he marched toward the doors. The Emperor paused for a fraction of a second, his shoulders stiffening, before he swept out of the hall, taking all his intimidating aura with him. I let out a long breath and slumped back onto my cushions. Surviving the Emperor was going to be easy. He just needed to realize how profoundly lazy I actually was. "All right, he's gone," I said, tapping the table. "Xiaoming, get off the floor. We have 3 more rounds before my afternoon nap." Chapter 3. The primary issue with being the villain in a historical harem drama is the sheer amount of unsolicited foot traffic. I was currently back in my purple brocade hammock, swinging gently beneath the plum blossom trees. I had successfully negotiated a plate of warm red bean pastries from the imperial kitchens, and was deeply committed to doing absolutely nothing for the next 4 hours. Then the courtyard gates creaked open. "Lady Lin Yu arrives to pay her respects to the Noble Consort," a eunuch announced, his voice practically trembling with anticipated drama. I cracked one eye open and sighed, letting my arm dangle over the edge of the hammock. Through the circular moongate stepped the protagonist of the Emperor's beloved lotus. Lady Lin Yu was objectively, infuriatingly beautiful. She was the epitome of the white lotus trope, delicate, ethereal, and dressed in a flowing, pale blue hanfu that made her look like she was perpetually gliding on a soft breeze. She had skin like white jade and large, doe-like eyes that were currently wide with absolute terror. She walked toward me as if she were approaching a live explosive. "Greetings to the Noble Consort," Lin Yu whispered, dropping into a graceful, trembling curtsy. In the novel, this was the moment Zhao Liying was supposed to accidentally on purpose spill boiling hot tea on Lin Yu's pristine dress, sparking a massive rivalry that would ultimately lead to my execution. I looked at the teapot resting on the stone table nearby. Then I looked at Lin Yu. "You can stand up," I said lazily, picking up a red bean pastry. "If you stay crouched like that, your knees will lock, and the imperial physicians are terrible at joint alignment." Lin Yu stood, though her shoulders remained rigidly hunched. She kept her eyes glued to the stone path, twisting an embroidered silk handkerchief between her delicate fingers. "Your Highness," she began, her voice quivering perfectly on pitch. I came to apologize. I know that His Majesty spent the evening with me at the pavilion on the night of your incident in the Lotus Pond. I never meant to monopolize the dragon's favor. Please punish me if you must." She closed her eyes tightly, bracing herself. She was literally waiting for me to slap her. I stopped chewing my pastry and took a good, long look at the heroine. Yes, she was beautiful. But up close in the harsh sunlight, I could see the faint, purplish shadows beneath her lovely eyes. The poor girl was probably exhausted. Harem politics, dodging assassins, and dealing with an emotionally repressed, brooding tyrant like Emperor Li Wei had to be a logistical nightmare. I didn't feel jealous. I felt profound pity. It was like watching a new intern get handed a massive, unformatted spreadsheet on a Friday afternoon. "Lin Yu," I said gently. She flinched. "Yes, Nyang Nyang. How much sleep are you getting?" Lin Yu blinked, her doe eyes flying open in utter confusion. Excuse me? Sleep?" I repeated, gesturing vaguely with my pastry. "The dark circles under your eyes are throwing off your entire ethereal aesthetic. You look like you've been pulling all-nighters analyzing tax ledgers. Is the Emperor keeping you up late talking about border skirmishes? His Majesty. We discuss poetry, she stammered, completely derailed by the conversation. But I have been anxious. The tension in the inner palace is very heavy. Well, obviously. Everyone here is chronically underfed and overdressed. I sighed, swinging my legs over the side of the hammock and sitting up. I pointed a sticky finger at her. Here is what you are going to do. Tell your maids to steep a pot of green tea. Let the leaves cool completely. Wrap them in thin silk, and press them under your eyes for 15 minutes before you sleep. The caffeine and cold temperature will restrict the blood vessels and reduce the puffiness. Lin Yu stared at me. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again. Green tea. On my face, Your Highness? Trust me. It works miracles, I assured her. I reached over to the stone table, picked up the plate of pastries, and thrust it toward her. Also, eat a pastry. Your blood sugar is practically hovering at a critical low, and you're going to faint if you have to endure another dramatic monologue from His Majesty. I couldn't possibly take Your Highness's food. Take the pastry, Lin Yu. It's an imperial command, I said using my best, most authoritative villain voice. Trembling, the sweet, delicate heroine reached out and took a warm red bean pastry. She looked at it as if she fully expected it to detonate. Now, I said, lying back down in the hammock and adjusting my silk pillows. I have a very busy schedule of doing absolutely nothing, and you are interrupting my REM cycle. Go put tea leaves on your face. And tell His Majesty that if he stresses you out again, I'm sending him a bill for your skincare. Yes, Nyang Nyang, Lin Yu whispered. She backed away slowly, clutching the pastry to her chest like a shield, her eyes wide with bewilderment. As she practically fled the courtyard, I heard Xiao Ming let out a long, confused sigh from the doorway. Nyang Nyang, why did you give her your favorite pastries? Xiao Ming asked, walking over to pour me a cup of tea. Are we trying to poison her with kindness? We are trying to keep her alive and pretty so the Emperor stays obsessed with her. I corrected, closing my eyes and smiling as the spring breeze rocked the hammock. If he's busy with his White Lotus, he won't have time to bother me. It's basic delegation, Xiao Ming. Now hush. The CEO is sleeping. Chapter 4. The Mid-Autumn Banquet was the social event of the year, which meant it was an absolute nightmare. Instead of my comfortable silk robes, Xiao Ming and a team of 4 maids had wrangled me into a suffocating, 10-pound gown of gold-embroidered crimson silk. My hair was pulled up into a towering structure of braids, and pinned into place with heavy jade ornaments that practically acted as lightning rods for migraines. The banquet hall was massive, glittering with thousands of lanterns and packed with chattering nobles, nervous concubines, and judgmental ministers. According to the original novel, this was the scene where I was supposed to trip Lin Yu as she performed a delicate fan dance, publicly humiliating her. Instead, I was sitting at my assigned table near the Emperor's dais, completely ignoring the fan dance in favor of my true love. A steaming, perfectly glazed plate of braised pork belly. Nyang Nyang, please chew with your mouth closed. Xiao Ming hissed from behind my chair, shielding me from view with a large feathered fan. The pork is melting, Xiao Ming, I whispered back, scooping up another piece with my silver chopsticks. I can't disrespect the chef's hard work by eating slowly. I glanced over at the center of the room. Lin Yu was finishing her dance. She looked radiant, and I was pleased to note that the dark circles under her eyes were completely gone. The green tea trick had worked. When she bowed, she caught my eye and offered a tiny, grateful, completely bewildered smile. I gave her a subtle thumbs up with my chopstick. At the head table, Emperor Li Wei sat on his golden throne. He looked bored, terrifying, and aggressively handsome in his dark ceremonial robes. He hadn't touched his food. Instead, his dark eyes kept sweeping the room, occasionally lingering on me with that same, intense, suspicious glare from my courtyard. I aggressively ignored him and focused on the pork. The music stopped, and a hush fell over the hall. It was time for the diplomatic presentations. An envoy from the neighboring kingdom of Yen stepped forward. He was a tall, arrogant-looking man with a braided beard, holding a cup of wine. Emperor Li Wei, the envoy boomed. In honor of the Mid-Autumn Festival, my king has sent me to present a poem of our people to celebrate your vast ambitions. Li Wei leaned back in his throne, resting his chin on his fist. Proceed. The envoy puffed out his chest and began to recite in a booming, dramatic cadence. The great golden eagle stretches its claws over the mountains. It sees the vast, jade ocean and hungers. But the eagle's stomach is smaller than its eyes. It dives for the deep water, only to find its feathers soaked, its lungs filled with salt, sinking beneath the waves it sought to drink. The envoy bowed with a smug, self-satisfied smile. The banquet hall went deathly silent. The court scholars turned pale. Everyone knew exactly what the envoy was doing. He was using flowery, highbrow metaphors to insult the emperor, essentially calling Li Wei a greedy tyrant whose military expansion was going to bankrupt his own empire. But because it was delivered as a celebratory poem, if Li Wei executed the man on the spot, he would look like a brute who didn't understand art. The scholars were supposed to translate and counter the poem with equal elegance, but they were all sweating profusely, terrified of saying the wrong thing. The tension in the room was so thick you could carve it. It was completely ruining my digestion. I sighed, dropping my chopsticks onto my jade plate with a sharp clack. In the dead silence of the hall, the sound echoed like a gunshot. Every head, including Li Wei's and the envoy's, snapped toward me. "Noble Consort," Li Wei said, his voice dangerously soft. "Do you have something to add to the envoy's poetry?" "Just a translation, Your Majesty," I said, dabbing my mouth with a silk napkin. I looked directly at the smug envoy. "It's a very pretty poem, but let's cut the corporate jargon. He's calling you a greedy micromanager." The court scholars collectively gasped. The envoy's face turned bright red. "Excuse me," the envoy sputtered. "I spoke of eagles and oceans. The poetry of Yen is passive-aggressive," I interrupted lazily, leaning my elbow on the table. "You're saying His Majesty's supply chain is going to collapse if he keeps expanding the western borders. You're implying our military budget is over-leveraged, and we're going to drown in our own overhead costs. It's a very standard risk assessment report wrapped in terrible bird metaphors." The hall was so quiet I could hear the lanterns flickering. Xiao Ming let out a tiny, whimpering sound of pure despair behind me. I had just bypassed imperial protocol, simplified a complex diplomatic insult into modern middle management speak, and spoken out of turn. I looked up at Li Wei, fully expecting him to order me dragged off to the dungeons for ruining the diplomatic dance. Instead, Emperor Li Wei was staring at me, his hand covering the lower half of his face. His shoulders were shaking. It took me a full 3 seconds to realize the terrifying tyrant of the novel was actually laughing. It was a dark, low, incredibly rich sound that made the entire court freeze in absolute terror. He dropped his hand, revealing a sharp, devastating smirk that completely transformed his cold features. "A greedy micromanager with an over-leveraged military budget," Li Wei repeated, tasting the bizarre modern words. His indigo eyes locked onto mine, burning with a sudden, intense fascination. He turned his gaze to the sweating envoy. "The Noble Consort is known for her blunt wisdom. Tell your king that the Golden Eagle knows exactly how to swim, and our overhead costs are well within my margins." The envoy bowed hastily, his smugness completely shattered, and practically scurried back to his seat. The tension in the room broke. The music hastily started up again. I let out a breath and picked my chopsticks back up, reaching for the last piece of braised pork. I could feel Li Wei's gaze on me for the rest of the night. It wasn't the cold, suspicious glare from before. It was something much heavier, much sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. I chewed my pork nervously. Apparently, avoiding the plot was going to be much harder if the Emperor decided my slacking was charming. Chapter 5. In the corporate world, when the drama gets too high, you apply for paid time off. In the imperial harem, PTO is notoriously hard to get approved, unless you count the Cold Palace. Historically, the Cold Palace was a place of despair, starvation, and weeping women who had lost the emperor's favor. But to my modern, exhausted brain, it sounded like a gated community with 0 mandatory social events, no heavy makeup requirements, and a guarantee that absolutely no one would bother me. My golden opportunity for banishment arrived on a rainy Tuesday. I was summoned to the Empress's main hall, where Consort Shu, a woman who had spent the last 3 years locked in a bitter, unrequited rivalry with the original Zhao Liying, was sobbing theatrically on the floor. Clutched in her hands was a spectacular, silver-embroidered ceremonial gown that looked like it had been violently attacked by a pack of feral badgers. Emperor Li Wei sat beside the Empress, massaging his temples as if he were trying to push a headache out of his skull. "Your Majesty, she is out of control," Consort Shu wailed, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at me as I strolled into the hall. The noble consort ordered her maids to shred my gown for the spring festival. She is jealous. She is wicked. She must be punished. In the novel, Zhao Liying would have screamed, demanded a trial by torture, and slapped Consort Shu across the face. I looked at the shredded dress. Then I looked at Li Wei. Yes, I said loudly, nodding my head in solemn agreement. I absolutely did it. My jealousy knows no bounds. I am a menace to society and textiles alike. The entire hall froze. Consort Shu stopped sobbing mid-hiccup. Even the imperial guards by the door looked confused. Li Wei lowered his hand from his face, his dark eyes locking onto mine with that intense, piercing stare. You confess? Without an investigation? Without blaming a rogue servant? I am taking full accountability for my toxic workplace behavior. I declared respectfully, bowing my head. I have clearly violated the handbook of imperial harmony. Therefore, I insist on the maximum penalty for a non-capital offense. Banishment to the cold palace. Immediately. Li Wei Zhao Glansha. You want to go to the cold palace? I accept my punishment with a heavy heart, Your Majesty. I lied, barely able to contain my excitement. I will need time to reflect. Alone. With no visitors. For at least a month. Consort Shu looked like she had just been robbed. The Empress looked bewildered. Li Wei looked as if he wanted to throttle me. He knew exactly what I was doing. I was leveraging a misdemeanor to get a state-sponsored vacation. Fine, Li Wei gritted out, his voice practically freezing the air in the room. The noble consort is banished to the northern cold palace until further notice. She is stripped of her luxury rations. Thank you, Your Majesty. Your justice is a beacon of light, I cheered, turning on my heel and practically sprinting back to my courtyard to pack. By nightfall, I was comfortably installed in my new accommodations. True to its name, the cold palace was drafty, dusty, and severely lacking in gold leaf. But Xiao Meng and I had smuggled in 3 heavy silk quilts, a stash of premium jasmine tea, 2 bags of dried persimmons, and my purple hammock. We spent an hour sweeping the main room, set up a makeshift luxury campsite on the large wooden bed, and I finally achieved the absolute, deafening silence I had been craving since my transmigration. I fell into a deep, glorious, uninterrupted sleep. Until roughly 2 a.m. I was awakened by a soft, metallic clink and a sudden rush of cold wind. I peeled my eyes open. Standing at the foot of my bed, illuminated only by the faint moonlight filtering through the broken window lattice, was a man dressed entirely in black. His face was covered by a mask, and in his right hand, he held a gleaming, wickedly sharp short sword. He raised the blade, preparing to strike. Do you have any idea what time it is? I groaned, rolling over and pulling the silk quilt up to my chin. The assassin froze. The sword hovered in mid-air. He looked down at me, clearly expecting me to scream, beg for my life, or throw a porcelain vase. It is the hour of the rat, he answered automatically, his voice a low, raspy whisper. Exactly. The hour of the rat. Also known as my deep REM sleep cycle. I complained, rubbing my eyes. Do you know how hard it is to fall back asleep once the melatonin production is disrupted? The assassin lowered his sword a fraction of an inch, taking a step back in sheer confusion. I am here to take your life, noble consort. Yes, I gathered that from the pointy metal stick. I sighed, sitting up and gesturing to the wooden table in the corner. Look, if Consort Shu sent you, she vastly underpaid you. If my father sent you to silence me, he's just being dramatic. Go look in that lacquered box on the table. Hesitantly, keeping his eyes on me, the assassin sidled over to the table and used the tip of his sword to flip open the box. It was filled with a massive pile of gold tails and 3 heavy jade pendants, my severance package that I had smuggled in. Take it, I offered generously. Take all of it. Tell whoever hired you that I threw myself down a well. Tell them I put up a massive, bloody fight. Make up a good story. Just please take the money, shut the window on your way out, and let me go back to sleep. The assassin stared at the gold. He stared at me. He looked down at his sword, visibly having an existential crisis regarding his chosen profession. You are offering me a bribe to just leave, he asked. I am offering you early retirement, I corrected, yawning widely. Now please. The draft from that window is ruining my feng shui. Suddenly, The heavy wooden doors of the cold palace courtyard blasted open with a deafening crash, followed by the terrifying, furious roar of Emperor Li Wei. My quiet, peaceful vacation was officially over. Chapter 6. If I had to rate Emperor Li Wei's dramatic entrance on a scale of 1 to 10, it was an easy 12. The heavy, rotting wooden doors of my cold palace bedchamber didn't just open. They practically splintered into matchsticks under the force of his dark leather boot. The emperor stormed into the room like a localized hurricane of black silk, gold embroidery, and pure, unfiltered fury. He had a drawn longsword in his hand, the polished steel gleaming in the moonlight. Behind him, a dozen imperial guards spilled into the courtyard, torches blazing. The assassin, who had been contemplating my early retirement package, completely panicked. He lunged for the window, but Li Wei moved with terrifying, inhuman speed. The emperor closed the distance, grabbed the assassin by the back of his black tunic, and hurled him halfway across the room. The man crashed into a wooden pillar and slumped to the floor, unconscious. Silence descended on the room, save for the crackling of the guards' torches outside. Li Wei stood over the unconscious assassin, his chest heaving, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might shatter. Slowly he turned his lethal, furious glare toward me. I was still sitting up in bed, the silk quilt pulled up to my chin, looking at the splintered remains of my door. "Your Majesty," I said, breaking the heavy silence. "I appreciate the rescue, I really do. But was it entirely necessary to destroy the door? The draft in here is now catastrophic." Li Wei looked as if he might actually pop a blood vessel. He marched over to my bed, his sword still in hand, his dark indigo eyes blazing with a mixture of rage and terror that he was desperately trying to mask. "You were being assassinated," he gritted out, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. "The guards reported a breach in the northern perimeter. I personally ran across 3 courtyards. And when I arrive, I find you, trying to pay him off with your jewelry? It's called a severance package," I corrected, yawning. "And it was working. We were in the middle of a very productive negotiation, until you kicked my door off its hinges." "You have absolutely no sense of self-preservation," he whispered, leaning down so his face was inches from mine. I could feel the heat radiating off him, the scent of cold night air and sandalwood rushing over me. "I have a very strong sense of self-preservation," I argued. "That is why I chose bribery over hand-to-hand combat. I don't do cardio." Li Wei stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. His chest was rising and falling rapidly. He looked like he wanted to yell at me, shake me, or possibly wrap me in bubble wrap. Instead, he abruptly straightened up and turned to the captain of the guard. "Take the assassin to the dungeons. I will interrogate him personally at dawn," Li Wei commanded, his voice returning to its usual, terrifyingly cold baseline. "And pack the Noble Consort's belongings. The cold palace is compromised. Her private courtyard is also compromised until a full security sweep is completed." "Wait, what?" I sat up straighter, sudden panic piercing my sleepy haze. "Where am I supposed to go? I can just sleep in Consort Shu's old room, she won't mind." "You are coming with me," Li Wei interrupted, sheathing his sword with a sharp clack. "To the Dragon Pavilion." My jaw dropped. The Dragon Pavilion wasn't just another palace. It was the Emperor's personal, highly restricted sleeping and working quarters. It was the absolute epicenter of imperial politics. It was the CEO's corner office, and he was dragging me into it. "Your Majesty, I cannot possibly impose on your workspace," I protested frantically, throwing the quilt off. "I am a bad influence. I will disrupt your workflow." I snore. "You will pack your things, Liying," he said softly, a dark, dangerous promise in his eyes. "And you will sleep where I can see you. That is an imperial decree." 30 minutes later, my glorious PTO was officially terminated. The Dragon Pavilion was exactly as I had feared. It was massive, imposing, and aggressively austere. The floors were polished obsidian, the walls lined with towering shelves of military scrolls and tax ledgers. There wasn't a single soft cushion, decorative vase, or brightly colored tapestry in sight. It looked like the architectural manifestation of a migraine. My slacker lifestyle was in critical danger. The environment was entirely too productive. The next morning, while Li Wei was at court, I decided to retaliate. If he was going to force me into cohabitation in his terrifying office, I was going to radically alter his corporate culture. I dispatched Xiao Meng to retrieve my emergency supplies. When Li Wei returned to his study that afternoon, Followed by 2 sweating ministers carrying stacks of reports, he stopped dead in the doorway. The austere, terrifying dragon pavilion had been compromised. I had ordered the eunuchs to lay down a massive, ridiculously plush white fur rug right in the center of the room. On top of the rug, I had constructed a fortress of plush, lavender-colored silk pillows. I was currently lounging in the center of the pillow fort, eating dried persimmons, and reading a very trashy romance novel I had bribed a guard to buy from the city market. Furthermore, I had confiscated his secondary reading table to set up a comprehensive tea and snack station, complete with a simmering pot of jasmine tea and 3 plates of pastries. "What?" Li Wei said, his voice deadly quiet. "Is this?" The 2 ministers behind him looked like they were preparing to write their own wills. "Ergonomics, Your Majesty," I said brightly, popping a piece of persimmon into my mouth and turning the page of my book. The tea in this room was very rigid. It was terrible for my lumbar support. "I've implemented a soft life initiative in the workspace. You're welcome to join me on the rug, but you have to take your boots off." The ministers gasped. Li Wei slowly closed his eyes, taking a deep, rhythmic breath that looked entirely like an exercise in extreme patience. He dismissed the ministers with a sharp wave of his hand. Once the doors closed, he walked over to his massive mahogany desk, which I had thankfully spared, and sat down, picking up an ink brush. "You are attempting to drive me insane, so I will banish you again," he observed astutely, not looking up from his scrolls. "I am merely optimizing my environment, Your Majesty," I replied, stretching my legs out on the soft fur. For the next 3 hours, a bizarre, silent war was waged in the Dragon Pavilion. Li Wei aggressively reviewed tax policies, his ink brush scratching furiously against parchment, emanating an aura of cold, tyrannical authority. I aggressively napped, occasionally turning a page of my trashy novel, or loudly pouring a cup of tea. The contrast was absurd. But as the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long, golden shadows across the obsidian floor, I looked up from my book. Li Wei had stopped writing. He was leaning his chin on his hand, his ink brush suspended in the air, simply watching me. His dark eyes weren't cold or suspicious anymore. They were soft, focused, and entirely too intense. He looked at my messy hair, my bare feet tucked under a silk pillow, and the plate of half-eaten pastries. He didn't look like a tyrant planning my execution. He looked like a man who had been starving in a desert for a decade, and had just been handed a glass of water. I quickly raised my book to hide my face, my heart suddenly doing a very fast, very unslacker-like flutter in my chest. "Abort mission," my brain screamed. "The CEO is becoming a romantic liability." Chapter 7. In my previous life, I absolutely despised mandatory corporate off-site retreats. The idea of going into the woods to do trust falls with middle management always felt like a hostage situation. The imperial equivalent of a corporate retreat was the annual spring hunt. It was a massive, highly publicized flex of military prowess. The entire court, including the military generals, the ministers, and the higher-ranking members of the harem, packed up and relocated to the lush, sprawling imperial hunting grounds at the base of the Western Mountains. It was a multi-day event designed for political networking, showing off archery skills, and presumably, getting eaten by a bear. "Your Highness, you must wear the riding habit," Xiaoming pleaded, holding up a stiff, heavily embroidered red jacket and a pair of leather boots. "All the other consorts are wearing them. Consort Shu has been practicing her archery for weeks. She plans to shoot a fox for His Majesty." I looked at the stiff collar of the riding jacket and physically recoiled. "I am not participating in a mandatory team-building exercise, Xiaoming. Put that away. Bring me the most breathable, lightweight silk robe we packed. Preferably something loose. And grab the parasol." While the rest of the imperial camp was a frenzy of whinnying horses, clanking armor, and highly competitive nobles trying to catch the Emperor's eye, I directed a team of 4 sweating eunuchs to a massive, ancient weeping willow tree near the edge of the camp, safely away from the actual forest. "Lay down the waterproof mat first," I instructed, pointing with my folding fan. "Then the fur rug. Then the silk cushions. And hang the sheer muslin canopy from those low branches." I refused to be a buffet for mosquitoes. By the time the hunting horn blew to signal the start of the event, my setup was flawless. While Consort Shu and the others were desperately trying to look elegant while sitting on highly unpredictable, sweaty horses, I was horizontally reclined on a mountain of pillows, protected by a sheer white canopy, eating chilled lychees out of a crystal bowl. From across the clearing, Emperor Li Wei sat atop a massive, terrifyingly muscular black warhorse. He was dressed in dark leather riding armor, looking every inch the ruthless, conquering tyrant he was written to be. As the ministers cheered, he raised his heavy hunting bow, the muscles in his arms pulling the thick string taut with terrifying ease, and fired a golden-tipped arrow directly into the center of a distant target to officially open the hunt. The crowd went wild. Lady Linyu, standing near the royal pavilion, clapped politely, looking a bit overwhelmed by the noise. Li Wei lowered his bow, but he didn't look at the cheering ministers, and he didn't look at Linyu. His dark eyes cut straight across the camp, piercing through the sheer muslin canopy of my picnic tent, locking directly onto me. I raised a chilled lychee in his direction in a silent toast, then popped it into my mouth and lay back on my pillows. The hunting party thundered off into the woods, the sound of hooves fading into the distance. Finally, peace. I instructed Xiao Ming to fan me, closed my eyes, and prepared for a glorious, 4-hour outdoor nap. I was asleep for exactly 45 minutes. The sound of heavy, rhythmic hoofbeats approaching my willow tree woke me. I groaned, throwing an arm over my eyes to block out the dappled sunlight. Xiao Ming, if that is my father coming to talk to me about political strategy, tell him I have contracted a highly contagious strain of laziness. It is not the Prime Minister, Nyang Nyang, Xiao Ming squeaked, immediately dropping to her knees. I pulled my arm away and sat up. Dismounting from his terrifying black warhorse, right outside my canopy, was Emperor Li Wei. He tossed the reins to a bewildered eunuch and ducked under the muslin netting, stepping onto my plush fur rug. He looked hot, irritated, and entirely too large for my cozy picnic setup. Your Majesty? I blinked, genuinely confused. Shouldn't you be out in the woods, establishing your dominance over the local wildlife? The local wildlife is currently being chased by 30 highly incompetent ministers trying to ensure I shoot the biggest stag, so they can flatter me at dinner. Li Wei sighed, his deep voice thick with exhaustion. He didn't wait for an invitation. He unfastened the heavy leather bracers from his forearms, tossed them onto the grass, and collapsed onto the fur rug right next to me. He leaned his back against the trunk of the willow tree, stretching his long legs out, and closed his eyes. They are exhausting, the Emperor of the Realm muttered, sounding exactly like a CEO hiding from his board of directors. I stared at him. The terrifying tyrant had abandoned the most important political networking event of the season to come sit in my pillow fort. Well, I said slowly, sliding the crystal bowl toward him. If you're going to hide from your KPIs, you might as well hydrate. Have a lychee. Li Wei opened one eye, looking at the bowl, then at me. Without a word he reached out, took a peeled fruit, and ate it. Sweet, he murmured. Xiao Ming, you are dismissed. Go get yourself a snack, I said, waving my maid away. She practically evaporated into thin air, leaving the two of us entirely alone under the swaying willow branches. You did not ride out, Li Wei noted, his dark eyes studying my relaxed, uncorseted posture. Consort Shu practically trampled the Minister of Revenue trying to secure a place behind my horse. Why did you stay behind? Because sitting on a horse hurts my spine. The woods are full of dirt, and I have absolutely no desire to watch politicians stroke your ego. I answered honestly, pouring a cup of chilled jasmine tea and pressing it into his large, calloused hand. Besides, what could I possibly gain from the hunt? Li Wei took a sip of the tea, his gaze never leaving my face. The intensity in his eyes was back, that heavy burning focus that made my pulse jump. Favor. Power. The things you used to scream at me for not giving you. I rested my chin on my knees, looking out through the sheer canopy at the quiet, empty camp. I realized something recently, Your Majesty. Ambition is a trap. The more you want, the harder you have to work to keep it. The harder you work, the less time you have to actually enjoy being alive. I don't want to run the inner palace. I just want a comfortable bed, good food, and the freedom to do absolutely nothing. Li Wei was silent for a long time. The warm spring breeze rustled the willow leaves above us. A comfortable bed and good food, he repeated softly. He leaned slightly closer, the scent of leather, horses, and sandalwood invading my space. Is that truly all you want, Liying? Nothing else? The way he said my name, so low, so dangerously intimate, sent a shiver straight down my spine that had nothing to do with the breeze. I swallowed hard, suddenly intensely aware of how close he was. If I leaned forward just 2 inches, my shoulder would brush against his chest. That's all I want. Li Wei smiled. It wasn't the terrifying smirk he used to intimidate his enemies. It was a genuine, devastatingly soft smile that completely ruined all my defensive protocols. Good, he whispered, setting his teacup down and shifting his weight, so his shoulder pressed firmly against mine. Because I find the view from this canopy infinitely more appealing than the forest. We sat there for the rest of the afternoon in comfortable, completely unauthorized silence. When the hunting party finally returned hours later, exhausted and covered in mud, the entire court was subjected to the horrifying, reality-breaking sight of the ruthless tyrant emperor fast asleep on a fur rug, his head resting dangerously close to the lap of the wicked noble consort. Chapter 8. Returning to the imperial capital after the spring hunt meant returning to the suffocating web of court politics. I immediately combated this by ordering my eunuchs to install a second hammock inside my bedchamber for rainy days. Unfortunately, my father, Prime Minister Zhao, did not respect my newly established work-life balance. He arrived at my courtyard unannounced on a Tuesday morning, wearing his heavy purple official robes, and an expression of intense, conspiratorial glee. Prime Minister Zhao was a cunning, ruthlessly ambitious man who had spent his entire life maneuvering our family toward the throne. According to the novel, he was the primary architect of my doom, pushing the original Zhao Liying to commit atrocities in the name of power before ultimately staging a failed coup. My brilliant, magnificent daughter, my father declared, sweeping into my hall and gesturing for Xiaoming to leave us. Once the doors were shut, he leaned in, lowering his voice to a theatrical whisper. I must admit, when I heard you were sleeping all day and ignoring court protocol, I was worried. But the spring hunt? A masterstroke. I paused mid-bite of a sesame ball. A masterstroke? Playing the aloof, unbothered beauty to ensnare the dragon, he chuckled darkly, stroking his goatee. You made the emperor abandon the ministers to sit in the dirt with you. It is a honey trap of the highest order. His Majesty's mind is clouded by your new, unconventional seduction. I stared at him. He genuinely thought my extreme laziness was a high-level psychological warfare tactic. Father, I assure you, my only strategy is optimizing my sleep cycle. Hush, Liying, the walls have ears, he interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. He reached into his wide sleeve and produced a thick, tightly rolled piece of premium bamboo parchment, sealed with dark red wax. He slid it across the rosewood table toward me, as if it were a venomous snake. This is the cipher, my father whispered, his eyes gleaming with treasonous intent. General Wu's troops are stationed at the western garrison. I need him to move them to the capital's outer gates by the next new moon. Tomorrow the Empress is hosting a lotus viewing party. General Wu's wife will be there. You must slip this parchment into her sleeve. If His Majesty is distracted by you, he will never suspect the transfer. I looked at the heavy parchment. It was literally the inciting incident for the rebellion that would get my entire fictional family executed. Father, I really don't think I have the bandwidth for a coup right now, I sighed, pushing the scroll back. Can't we just enjoy our immense wealth and not commit high treason? Prime Minister Zhao patted my hand condescendingly. Keep your eyes on the throne, my daughter. The Zhao family will rule. Do not fail me. With a swirl of his purple robes, he swept out of my courtyard, leaving me alone with a highly incriminating document. I stared at the sealed parchment. I should have burned it. I should have thrown it in the lotus pond. But honestly, getting up to find a fire source felt like a lot of effort, and I was in the middle of a very engaging chapter of my trashy romance novel. I tossed the treasonous scroll onto the corner of the table, and promptly forgot about it. Later that evening, tragedy struck. The imperial kitchen sent over a fresh batch of scallion pancakes, but they were exceptionally greasy. I was lounging on my daybed, reading by the light of a pearl lamp, trying to eat a pancake without ruining the pages of my book. Xiaoming, bring me a napkin. I called out. I am washing the tea set in the outer hall, Nyang Nyang. I will be just a moment, she called back. I couldn't wait. The pancake was hot and the oil was dripping onto my fingers. Desperate times called for desperate measures. I glanced at the table, saw the thick, durable bamboo parchment my father had left, and made an executive decision. I broke the red wax seal, flattened the heavy paper, and wrapped it securely around the bottom of my scallion pancake. It worked perfectly. The premium imperial parchment absorbed the grease like a dream. The next day, I completely skipped the Empress's lotus viewing party, because it looked like it was going to rain, and the humidity was bad for my joints. By sunset, the entire palace was on lockdown. I was jolted awake from my afternoon nap by the sound of armored boots marching through the courtyards. The heavy wooden doors to my hall slammed open. Emperor Li Wei strode in, flanked by 4 elite shadow guards. He was dressed in his black combat armor, looking absolutely terrifying. His jaw was clenched tight enough to crack stone. "Leave us," Li Wei barked at his guards and my terrified servants. The room cleared instantly. He turned to me, his dark indigo eyes blazing. "Your father's estate was raided an hour ago. My spies intercepted a messenger bound for the western garrison. Prime Minister Zhao has been plotting a rebellion." "Oh right. The treason." I sat up, blinking sleepily. "Is that today? I thought he said the new moon." Li Wei froze, his imposing, terrifying aura faltering for a second. You admit you knew?" He took a step toward me, his voice dropping into a raw, fractured whisper. "Lying, tell me you are not part of this. Tell me my guards are not going to find a coded cipher coordinating troop movements, with General Wu in this room." "Well, about that," I said, rubbing the back of my neck awkwardly. "He did give me a cipher yesterday. He wanted me to give it to General Wu's wife." Li Wei closed his eyes, a look of profound, devastating betrayal washing over his sharp features. His hand rested heavily on the hilt of his sword. "Where is the parchment, Zhao Liying?" "It's in the wastebasket by the vanity," I said honestly. Li Wei's eyes snapped open. He marched over to the small woven basket, clearly expecting to find torn evidence or a cleverly hidden false bottom. He reached in and pulled out the thick bamboo parchment. It was covered in large, translucent grease stains. A few stray pieces of green scallion were stuck to the Prime Minister's official seal. The Emperor of the realm stared at the highly treasonous, heavily coded military document. He held it up to the light. The grease had completely blurred the ink, rendering the complex cipher entirely illegible. "Lying," Li Wei said slowly, his voice completely devoid of its former terror. "Why does the Prime Minister's secret rebellion cipher smell like fried dough?" "The scallion pancakes were excessively oily last night, Your Majesty," I explained with a helpless shrug. "I didn't have a napkin. The bamboo paper was very absorbent. I forgot to give it to the general's wife, because I didn't go to the party." Li Wei stared at the greasy paper. He looked at my messy hair and the indentation of a pillow on my cheek. He looked back at the paper. The tense, deadly silence of the room was suddenly broken by a sound that made the shadow guards outside the door flinch. Li Wei threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, unhinged, booming laugh of pure, disbelieving relief. He laughed so hard he had to brace a hand against the vanity, dropping the greasy treason document back into the trash. He walked back over to my daybed, his dark eyes shining with intense, undeniable affection, and pulled me directly against his armored chest. "You accidentally thwarted a military coup because you needed a snack wrapper," he murmured into my hair, his chest still shaking with laughter. "I prefer to think of it as maintaining imperial stability through intuitive resource management." I mumbled into his shoulder, secretly thrilled by how warm he felt. "Now, since my family is about to be exiled, does this mean my allowance is cut? Because I still need my lychees." Chapter 9. The fallout from my father's failed rebellion was swift, brutal, and entirely handled while I was taking a nap. Prime Minister Zhao and his co-conspirators were stripped of their ranks and exiled to the freezing northern borders. Normally, the family of a traitor would be executed down to the 9th generation. However, Emperor Li Wei stood before the imperial court and declared that the Noble Consort was a hero of the realm who had single-handedly thwarted the coup via unorthodox intelligence suppression. No one needed to know the intelligence was suppressed by a scallion pancake. I was officially safe. More importantly, my lychee allowance was doubled. A few days later, I found myself wandering the massive, quiet aisles of the Imperial Library Pavilion. I had finished my trashy romance novel, and was desperately searching the archives for a sequel. The library was a towering labyrinth of carved mahogany shelves, smelling of old paper, dust and dried ink. I was standing on my tiptoes, trying to reach a promising-looking silk-bound volume titled The Secret Passions of the Wandering Swordsman, when a shadow fell over me. A large, calloused hand reached over my head and easily pulled the book from the high shelf. "Is this essential reading for maintaining imperial stability, Noble Consort?" Li Wei's deep, smooth voice murmured right by my ear. I jumped, spinning around. Li Wei had backed me directly against the towering bookshelf. He was wearing informal dark blue robes, his dark hair tied back with a simple jade crown. Without the heavy armor or the golden dragons of his office, he looked less like an untouchable deity and more like a devastatingly handsome, incredibly intense mortal man. He looked down at the cover of the trashy novel, raised an eyebrow, and then snapped the book shut with a sharp clack. He placed his hands on the shelf on either side of my head, effectively trapping me in a cage of mahogany and sandalwood scent. Your Majesty. I breathed, my heart doing a completely unslacker-like backflip. You move very quietly for a man who commands a standing army. Li Wei didn't smile. His dark indigo eyes were searching my face, heavy with a frustration that seemed to have been brewing for weeks. You did not come to the Dragon Pavilion last night, he stated. His voice was low, laced with a dangerous edge. I ordered the eunuchs to lay out your fur rug. I had the kitchens prepare those red bean pastries you like. You stayed in your own courtyard. Well, my door is fixed now, I stammered, flattening myself against the books. And the political crisis is over. I figured you needed your workspace back to do, emperor things. Tax reform. Beheading corrupt officials. Brooding. I do not want my workspace back. I want you in it, he said, leaning in closer. His gaze dropped to my lips before snapping back up to my eyes. Why do you push me away, Liying? I don't push you away, I am just highly committed to physical distancing. Stop deflecting, he interrupted, his voice dropping into a raw, commanding whisper. You treat everything like a game. You treat your own life like a passing inconvenience. You thwart a rebellion with a snack wrapper. You bribe assassins with your own jewelry, and you look at me as if you are just waiting for me to leave. He was too close. The air between us was electric, pulling tight, stripping away my lazy facade. I look at you that way because I know how this ends, Li Wei. I blurted out, my anxiety finally overriding my chill. I know I'm on borrowed time. Li Wei froze, his expression faltering. Borrowed time? Are you ill? Did the imperial physicians miss something? No, I'm not ill. I'm doomed. I pushed against his chest, but he felt like a solid wall of warm muscle. I know my destiny. I am the wicked Noble Consort. You are supposed to hate me. You're supposed to fall in love with the sweet, kind white lotus, and I am supposed to be banished to the cold palace. For real this time, and you are going to order me to drink poisoned wine. The silence in the imperial library was deafening. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight filtering through the high windows. Li Wei stared at me, his eyes wide with absolute, unadulterated horror. You think? He choked out, his voice suddenly hoarse. You genuinely believe that I am going to execute you? That I would hand you poison? It's the plot. I practically wailed, the stress of knowing the novel's ending finally spilling out. It is chapter 150. You execute me, and I die, and you live happily ever after without my chaotic snacking habits. Li Wei didn't ask what a chapter was. He didn't ask about the plot. He simply processed the fact that the woman he had been trying to court for months genuinely believed he was a ticking time bomb waiting to murder her. He let out a ragged breath, stepping perfectly flush against me. He grabbed my wrists, gently but firmly pinning them to his chest, right over his racing heart. Listen to me, Li Wei commanded fiercely, his indigo eyes blazing with a terrifying, absolute conviction. I do not care what prophecies you have heard. I do not care what nightmares you are having. I am the Son of Heaven. If the heavens have written a destiny where I harm a single hair on your head, then I will burn the heavens down and rewrite the stars myself. I stopped struggling. My mouth went dry. Okay, that was an incredibly cheesy, highly dramatic line, but wow, did it work. Li Wei. I whispered. There is no poisoned wine, Liying, he swore, his thumb gently brushing across my cheek. There is no white lotus. There is only a terrifyingly lazy, incredibly brilliant woman who has completely ruined my ability to focus on running this empire. I am not your executioner. I am yours. Entirely. Before I could even formulate a sarcastic response to protect my rapidly melting heart, Li Wei lowered his head and kissed me. It was not a cold, tyrannical kiss. It was desperate, consuming, and deeply terrifying in the best way possible. I dropped the secret passions of the wandering swordsman onto the floor. My hands slid up from his chest, wrapping around his neck, my fingers tangling in his dark hair as I kissed him back. He pulled me flush against him, lifting me slightly off the floor, completely shattering whatever remained of my plan to avoid the male lead. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. You are moving back into the Dragon Pavilion, Li Wei murmured against my lips. And I am assigning 3 food tasters to your kitchen. Just in case. Chapter 10. If there is one thing that ruins a perfectly good evening of lounging, it is a mandatory victory banquet. Following the swift and decisive crushing of my father's scallion pancake rebellion, Emperor Li Wei decreed a night of celebration. The banquet hall was packed. The mood was electric, though slightly tense, considering half the court was still sweating over whether they were accidentally tied to the Prime Minister's treason. I sat at the highest table, situated directly to the right of Emperor Li Wei. Throughout the first 3 courses, Li Wei maintained a terrifying, icy facade of imperial authority for the court. But under the long silk tablecloth, his large, warm hand was firmly wrapped around mine, his thumb drawing slow, distracting circles on my palm. It was highly scandalous, incredibly distracting, and making it very difficult to focus on my crispy duck. Noble Consort. A smooth, oily voice called out, cutting through the chatter. I looked up. Standing before the dais, holding an ornate silver goblet, was Minister Fong. He was a holdover from my father's faction. A man who had loudly and publicly disavowed Prime Minister Zhao the moment the Imperial Guard showed up, thereby keeping his head. The court owes you a great debt, Minister Fong announced, bowing deeply, though his eyes darted nervously around the room. Your unparalleled wisdom rooted out the rot within our own ranks. I humbly offer this toast, a rare vintage of plum wine from the southern provinces, to your health and longevity. A eunuch stepped forward, carrying a jade tray with a single, exquisitely carved jade cup, and placed it on the table in front of me. Drink, Your Highness, Minister Fong urged, his smile pulling tight at the corners. May your favor last 10,000 years. In the original novel, this was it. Chapter 150. The moment the poisoned cup was delivered. Of course, in the book, the Emperor handed it to me. Now the remnants of my father's faction were trying to tie up loose ends and take out the traitor daughter who had foiled their coup. Li Wei let go of my hand, his posture stiffening, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed Minister Fong. He didn't trust the man, but refusing a toast of loyalty in front of the entire court was a breach of protocol. I looked down at the jade cup. The plum wine was a deep, rich ruby color. Now, I was a lazy woman, but I was also a woman who took her afternoon tea very seriously. Over the past month, to ensure maximum relaxation, I had aggressively micromanaged the imperial botanists, forcing them to teach me everything about herbal infusions, flavor profiles, and toxic roots that could accidentally give me a stomachache. I leaned forward and subtly sniffed the wine. Beneath the sweet, heady scent of fermented plums, there was a sharp, distinct note. It smelled exactly like crushed bitter apricot kernels, laced with the metallic tang of zhenzhen, the legendary toxic bird feather poison, specifically designed to cause sudden, catastrophic cardiac arrest. Well, that's just rude. I didn't scream. I didn't knock the cup over. I calmly picked up the jade cup by its base and swirled the ruby liquid, offering Minister Fong a serene, unblinking smile. Minister Fong, you honor me, I said, my voice projecting clearly across the suddenly quiet hall. But as a woman of profound filial piety and humility, I could not possibly drink this rare vintage alone. Such a magnificent gift should be shared with the one who presented it. Minister Fong's face went completely white. He looked like a man who had just swallowed a live toad. Your Highness, it is a toast to you. I insist, I said brightly, standing up. My heavy crimson skirts rustled as I stepped down from the dais, walking directly toward him. I held out the jade cup. Please, drink to my longevity, Minister. The entire court watched with bated breath. Li Wei was already on his feet, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, his indigo eyes tracking the scene with lethal precision. He had caught on instantly. Minister Fong took a step backward, his hands trembling. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Noble Consort, I am merely a humble servant. I am unworthy of the imperial cup. Oh, don't be shy, I chirped, stepping closer and thrusting the cup under his nose. Drink it, Fong. If you don't, I will assume you are rejecting imperial favor. And you know how much His Majesty hates a breach of protocol. I cannot. Fong gasped, his eyes darting toward the exits. Why? Are you allergic to plums? I tilted my head, dropping the cheerful facade, my voice turning icy. Or are you allergic to the massive dose of Crustian poison you just tried to serve me in front of the entire court? Pandemonium erupted. Several ministers leaped out of their chairs. Lady Linyu, seated a few tables away, let out a shocked gasp and covered her mouth. Minister Fong lunged, not for the cup, but for the dagger hidden in his sleeve, attempting a desperate, last-ditch strike. He didn't even make it a full step. A blur of black and gold silk moved past me. Emperor Li Wei vaulted the table with terrifying, predatory grace. His boot connected squarely with Minister Fong's chest, sending the man flying backward into a decorative pillar with a sickening crunch. The hidden dagger skittered harmlessly across the polished floor. Before Fong could even groan, Li Wei's sword was drawn, the razor-sharp steel pressed directly against the minister's throat. "Guards!" Li Wei roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the hall. "Take him to the dungeons. Arrest every member of his household. Seal the palace gates." The shadow guards materialized from the darkness, dragging the coughing, defeated minister away. The banquet hall was in absolute chaos, nobles weeping and throwing themselves onto the floor in terror. Through it all, Li Wei ignored them. He turned around, sheathed his sword, and walked straight back to me. He grabbed my shoulders, his eyes frantically scanning me for any sign of injury, though I hadn't even spilled a drop of the wine. His chest was heaving. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice rough. "Did you touch the liquid? Did you inhale it?" "I'm fine, Li Wei," I assured him, holding up the untouched jade cup. "Though I am severely disappointed. I was promised plum wine, and all I got was an assassination attempt. This completely ruins the dessert course." Li Wei stared at me, the sheer adrenaline and terror slowly fading from his eyes, replaced by that familiar, deep, exasperated fondness. "You smelled the poison," he realized, running a hand through his hair. "You smelled a colorless, practically scentless imperial poison." "I am a connoisseur of beverages," I sniffed proudly. "No one messes with my drinks." Without a word, in front of the entire terrified, prostrating court, Emperor Li Wei pulled me into his arms and buried his face in my neck, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You are going to be the death of me, Zhao Liying," he whispered against my skin. "Unlikely," I whispered back, wrapping my arms around him. "I'm way too lazy to plan a funeral. But you do owe me a fresh cup of tea. Unpoisoned, please." Chapter 11. The morning after the poison wine incident, the imperial court was subjected to the swiftest, most aggressive house cleaning in the history of the empire. I, of course, slept through the majority of it. By the time Xiaoming finally coaxed me out of bed and into a relatively subdued, deep purple silk gown, Emperor Li Wei had already systematically dismantled the remnants of my father's faction. Minister Fong was in the deepest dungeon, singing like a canary, and the remaining conspirators were being rounded up and stripped of their titles. When I finally ambled into the Great Harmony Hall, stifling a yawn behind my folding fan, the court was on edge. My father, the former Prime Minister Zhao, had been officially exiled to the frozen north. Historically, this was the exact moment the wicked Noble Consort was supposed to fall to her knees, beg for mercy, and be dragged away to her doom. The ministers parted from me like the Red Sea, keeping their eyes glued to the polished obsidian floor. They fully expected me to be escorted to the execution block. Instead, I walked up the steps of the dais and stopped before the golden throne. Emperor Li Wei sat in his imperial majesty, wearing his terrifying golden dragon robes, the heavy jade crown resting on his dark hair. He looked every inch the ruthless tyrant, until he saw me. The icy, lethal glare that had been paralyzing the ministers instantly melted. "Noble Consort," Li Wei said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the massive hall. "Your Majesty," I replied, offering a lazy, half-hearted curtsy because my knees were still tired from yesterday's banquet. "The Zhao family has been found guilty of high treason," he announced, his gaze sweeping over the trembling court before landing back on me. "However, the heavens are just, and they see the truth of all hearts. The noble consort not only refused to participate in this treason, but actively thwarted it, repeatedly risking her own life to protect the throne." A murmur rippled through the hall. Risking my life was a very generous way to describe using a cipher as a napkin, but I wasn't going to correct him. Therefore, Li Wei continued, standing up from his throne and descending the steps to stand directly in front of me. "The noble consort is absolved of all familial guilt. She is the singular light of loyalty in this palace. Let it be known that anyone who speaks a word against her will answer directly to my blade. He held out his hand. I looked at his large calloused palm, then up into his dark indigo eyes. The terrifying tyrant of the novel was completely gone. In his place was a man who had literally rewritten the stars, dismantled a rebellion, and probably ordered a fresh batch of pastries for my afternoon nap, all before lunch. I smiled, placed my hand in his, and let him pull me up to stand beside him on the dais. The entire court dropped to their knees in a synchronized wave of submission. Later that afternoon, the Dragon Pavilion was finally quiet. The ministers had been dismissed, the edicts had been signed, and I was back in my natural habitat. Horizontally reclined on the plush white fur rug I had permanently installed in Li Wei's office. You do realize, I said, peeling a lychee and popping it into my mouth, that by sparing me, you have completely ruined the dramatic arc of this dynasty. Li Wei was sitting at his massive mahogany desk, a mountain of scrolls pushed completely to the side. He was resting his chin on his hand, simply watching me. He had been doing that a lot lately. I am fine with a lack of drama, he murmured, his eyes tracking a drop of lychee juice on my thumb. I have had enough drama for a lifetime. No poison wine? No tragic betrayals. I teased, rolling onto my stomach and propping my chin in my hands. Li Wei stood up, abandoning his empire's paperwork entirely, and walked over to the rug. He knelt down gracefully, his dark robes pooling around him, and leaned over me. He plucked the remaining lychee from my fingers and ate it, his gaze dropping to my lips. The only thing I am interested in being poisoned by is you, he said smoothly. That was terrible. That was a terrible line, Your Majesty. You sound like a bad poet. I laughed, pushing playfully at his chest. He caught my wrists, pinning them gently to the fur rug, a devastating, genuine smile breaking across his sharp face. I am a military commander, Liying, not a scholar. But I am learning. Admit it. You find me charming. I looked up at him, at the warmth in his eyes and the solid, undeniable reality of him. The plot was broken. The novel was over. I wasn't going to die in chapter 150, and I didn't have to fight a white lotus for survival. I just had to survive this man's terrifyingly intense affection. You're all right, I whispered, pulling my wrists free to wrap my arms around his neck. When you aren't brooding. And when you remember to approve my snack budget. Li Wei laughed, a rich, deep sound, before lowering his head to kiss me, officially closing the book on the tragic destiny of Zhao Liying. Epilogue. 3 years later. The imperial palace was significantly less dramatic these days. Lady Linyu, the supposed tragic heroine of my former life's novel, had successfully escaped the harem. After I casually suggested to Li Wei that she looked miserable trapped behind the palace walls, he arranged a highly prestigious marriage for her. She was now happily married to a handsome, easygoing scholar from the Ministry of Rights, living in a lovely estate in the capital, entirely free of assassination attempts and boiling tea spills. We occasionally exchanged letters. She sent me skincare recipes, and I sent her premium tea leaves. As for me, I was now the empress of the realm. Surprisingly, the promotion hadn't changed my daily schedule much at all. I was currently lounging in my favorite sunlit pavilion, overlooking the imperial lotus pond. The afternoon was warm, the breeze was gentle, and I was resting my head on a mountain of lavender silk pillows. Xiaomeng the grapes, I murmured lazily, not opening my eyes. Xiaomeng is currently managing the new palace maids, my love. A deep, incredibly familiar voice replied. I cracked an eye open. Emperor Li Wei, the absolute ruler of the known world, was sitting on a low stool right beside my daybed. He had completely abandoned a towering pile of urgent imperial decrees resting on a nearby table. Instead, he was holding a crystal bowl in one hand, feeding me a peeled grape, while aggressively fanning me with a painted silk fan in the other. Shouldn't you be managing a flood in the southern provinces or something? I mumbled, chewing the sweet fruit. I delegated the flood to the Minister of Works, Li Wei said calmly, adjusting the angle of the fan to ensure maximum breeze on my face. My current priority is ensuring the Empress does not overheat. You are a terrible tyrant, I sighed happily, shifting to get more comfortable. I am a highly optimized micromanager, he corrected, using the phrase I had taught him years ago, his dark indigo eyes gleaming with amusement and total devotion. He leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead. Go to sleep, Liying. I will be right here when you wake up. I closed my eyes, sinking into the silk pillows, the gentle breeze from his fan lulling me into a perfect afternoon nap. It turns out, surviving a deadly, high-stakes transmigration novel wasn't actually that difficult. You didn't need to scheme, plot, or fight for power. You just had to aggressively delegate your problems, secure a steady supply of snacks, and find a terrifyingly handsome emperor willing to let you sleep right through the plot. That's where this love story ends for now. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more romantic twists. Tell me in the comments what will you have done. Until the next story, keep craving romance.